Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday and welcome to the Saratoga Podcast. Dan and Adam, my long-lost brothers from another mother. I'm so happy to be back with you today.
Yeah, we're all parents of young kids, and anybody who has children know that June is tough. There's graduations and parties and sporting events that are ending and beginning and yada yada. But yeah, I'm glad we made some time. It was an interesting night last night.
It was a very interesting night. Dan, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just wondering who you two people are. Okay, go ahead.
I'm Robin. That's Adam.
Yeah, Dan, you're not that old yet, are you?
No, it's just been that long. Each other.
Yeah, somebody bring Dan some porridge and a warm blanket. He's going nuts. He's getting old.
No, I'm so happy to be back with the three of you because we had a big night last night. It was the Democratic primary in Saratoga Springs last night. And to be honest with you, I'm like a little punchy tired today, which could be like a dangerous thing when mixed with like a podcast platform. So I'm going to try to keep myself in line, but you know, you never know. Because I want to break down these primary results from last night. And I know you guys do want to as well. So shall we just dive right in?
Yeah, to give you a little background, this is the Democratic primary to have the Democrat line, that's row A on the ballot is it November, correct?
November. There were two Democrats who wanted to run for mayor on the Democratic line for the November 7th election in Saratoga Springs. And so Ron Kim was the incumbent mayor who got the endorsement of the Democratic committee. And then Chris Mathieson was a Democrat who decided to challenge Ron Kim for the Democratic line. And to do that, you have to run in a primary. And primaries in New York State are held on June 27th. They're always held in June, at the end of June. That was a change that was made back in 2019. And whoever wins the primary in June gets that Democratic line for the November election, which will be held this year on November 7th.
And just to give people a little background, in order to primary somebody, you have to go out and get signatures from constituents in that party. So Chris Mathieson had to go out and get something like 820 signatures from registered Democrats to be able to primary somebody. It's not just, you don't just declare it and say, I'm going to primary. Yeah. It
wasn't quite that many process, but you do have to get a ton of signatures, yes, to be able to get on the ballot for the primary.
Just one historical fact, it was just a couple of years ago, these primaries were held in September. This is kind of a big change. I'm not used to these summer primaries.
Correct. And I actually think, here's when I'm going to start getting punchy already. I actually think, by the way, guys, there's going to be expletives on this episode of the podcast coming from Robin Dalton's mouth. So if you're expletive sensitive, just put on some earmuffs. I think the June primaries are total bullshit because they are always now like the week after public schools have been let out. In 2019, it was the first day of summer vacation. This is not a time when voters are thinking about politics. They're thinking about getting to the polls. This is not a time when our electorate, I think, is focused on just voting in general. And I think that moving them from September to June, we've seen across the state that there's been a significantly depressed turnout. And that's actually something we also saw last night that we'll get into in a moment. But I just think it was a huge mistake on behalf of New York State. And I think it was probably primarily driven by Democrats who want to retain Democratic control within the state and retain their kind of one-party majority. But that's just Robin's theory. Anyway.
I'll blame the Democrats. I'm on board.
Yeah, let's blame the Democrats on this one. I'm a Democrat. I can blame the Democrats. So early voting started earlier in the month, but last night was the Democratic primary. Now, typically, in recent years, the last Democratic primary that we can look at for turnout and kind of to analyze and compare would be the primary between Michelle Madigan and Patty Morrison back in 2019. Now, in that primary, the turnout was 1,498 Democrats. That's how many people turned out in 2019. And you usually see kind of a slightly more extreme element of the party who turn out for primaries.
Was that a June real quick? Was that a June primary?
Yeah, it was actually the first year they did the June primary. Okay. It was the very first year.
So it's comparable.
And it was literally the very first day of summer vacation. Like school had ended the day before, which I just thought was like horrible timing all around. But anyway, so almost exactly 1,500 people turned out in 2019. So I would think based on that number in 2019, here we are in 2023, the Democratic enrollment has gone up significantly over the last 4 years. And so you would expect to see, in my opinion, a slightly higher turnout going into this primary in 2023. I was expecting maybe 1,800 people around there to be voting last night. I don't know what your predictions were, but that's kind of what I was thinking initially, in terms of how many people we would see voting.
Did they have early voting back in 19? I can't recall.
That's an excellent question. I don't think they did, actually. I don't think they did at all.
I know there were 300 and plus, right, that early voted in this particular primary last night.
Actually, there was about 600 people who early voted in Saratoga County, but there were 5 primaries going on. So there's no way to tell exactly how many of those. I think I'd have to look at the results from last night. We didn't know going into the primary yesterday how many of those votes applied specifically to the mayoral primary here.
I think it was just over 300. The TU did Wendy Libertor posted that there were like 310 left, 309 left that were early voting.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll trust Wendy, I guess, on that one. I joke. I jest. So anyway, yesterday, though, we began to get news from the polling places, both anecdotal and from actually the Commissioner of Accounts indirectly, that they were seeing low voter turnout. And I wasn't totally surprised by that. Like going into primary season, I was expecting about 1,800 people to turn out. But as the campaigns continued, I just thought this was not campaigns on either side that people were going to be excited about, that they were not excited about either candidate, and they were not going to get excited about either campaign. And so when I heard that there was lower voter turnout happening yesterday, I wasn't completely shocked. Were you guys?
Based on what you're saying, no. Yeah, you're right. It was not a spirited campaign either, and we'll talk about the why in a few minutes. But that helped. Like, no, there was nothing. There was no. It was low energy, right? It was low energy, like you said, not that much interest. So summer days. So yeah, for a lot of reasons, I'm not shocked by low turnout.
Yes.
Yeah. I was, and you took issue with that. Chris Matthiessen was running as the other choice almost. That was his campaign, and then Ron Kim was running on some achievements that I know you and former Commissioner Madigan had some issues with, or at least the Commissioner of Public Finance brought up these accomplishments that it's hard to give, and we've kind of seen this in politics, how projects are started and years in the making. And it's whoever's in office kind of takes credit a lot of the time when it's completed, but they weren't there for the foundation.
I want to get into that in a minute. I kind of want to go through the numbers, but then I definitely want to kind of delve into the two campaigns and I think why the numbers worked out the way they were. But ultimately, last night, 1,430 people voted. So 1,430 people voted in total. So about 70 less votes than back in 2019. So definitely a lower than one would expect if you were just looking at like trend in terms of the population growth, in terms of the Democratic enrollment growth from 2019 to 2023. So 1,430 people turned out, and the results were 864 votes for Ron Kim and 566 votes for Chris Matthiessen. So Ron Kim won with 20% of the vote. So that was the breakdown. 864 votes for Ron Kim, 566 votes for Chris Matthiessen. Ron Kim wins with 20% of the vote. So I really want to talk about this for a little bit and sink our teeth into it if we can, because a couple things. First, I should disclose this right off the bat, and I got a little bit of heat for not talking about this when we had Chris Matthiessen on and interviewed him. Dan, I know you weren't here for that, but we had Chris Matthiessen on earlier in the month. Adam and I had a nice long conversation with him, and I did not talk about my relationship with the campaign, and so I think it's probably fairly important that I do now. It's obviously like a little bit of a sensitive topic. I don't know what that crumbling noise is. But I'm going to try to articulate it as well as I can. So from March.
Robin, you're distorted. That may be coming from your end.
Well, let's try this. When I talk, is there a distortion?
Actually, there is. How about me?
I think it's Dan.
I think it's you, Dan.
Okay.
Dan, can you mute yourself? It's definitely Dan.
If it's a technical issue,
Okay.
Dan. All right, go. So,
okay.
You were saying.
I'll keep going. So I might mute Dan. Dan, can you mute yourself? Okay.
All right.
Dan will return. So basically what I was going to say was that from March until the beginning of May, I was Chris Mathiessen's campaign.
March to May. Go on, sorry.
From March to the beginning of May, I was Chris Mathiessen's campaign manager. And then we parted ways. And we parted ways very amicably, very professionally. I did some minor freelance work for him from May to the end of June, but I stopped being his campaign manager the first week in May. And so I just wanted to throw that out there and let people know so that people did not think that I would interview someone as his campaign manager or because I think that would actually be really shitty. And that would have been an important disclosure to make if I were to have someone on the show and interview them as a candidate. If I was their campaign manager at the time, that would have been an important point to make.
Yeah, that's the problem I have with a lot of local media too, is that they're obviously biased, they're driven, but there's no disclaimers there. They come off as a nonpartisan, neutral reporting the news when we clearly see bias in everything story after story, and that's an issue when they don't do that. So I'll give you a pass, Rob, and other people didn't, but
thank you. And you'll see it and we're going to I want to talk about the campaign filings and the money that was spent, and you'll see it in Chris's campaign filing. He paid me $4,000 for the time that I was his campaign manager. And then he paid me a much smaller amount of money for the contractual freelance work that I did for the remaining weeks. But anyway, just wanted to get that out there. I still respect Chris, support Chris. I voted for Chris in the primary, and I plan on voting for him in the general election. So that being said, I think based on the amount of money that Ron Kim dumped into his campaign, based on the fact that he is the incumbent mayor, the fact that he could only turn out 864 votes is pretty freaking pathetic. And Chris Mathiessen, the campaign that he did ultimately run was pretty non-existent, in my opinion. I don't want to directly criticize his campaign, but I will talk about kind of the campaign I would run if I was running a primary myself. If I was running a primary myself, I would be doing fundraisers. I would be doing as many mailers as I could do. I would be getting this target list of Democrats that you use a bunch of different search parameters to come up with. And I would be contacting them as much as humanly possible through door knocking, through mailers, through phone banking. I would be putting out a palm card with an articulated platform on it. I would have that platform on my mail pieces. And those were things that Chris really didn't do. He did a lot of door knocking. I believe he did one very small mail piece that was just really a reminder that there was a primary coming up, but that was generally it. And he also spent a fraction of the money that Ron Kim spent. And I can show you, based on going over the Board of Election filings, what Ron's major expenses were. Here's some of Ron's major expenses. So Ron started fundraising back in late 2022, early 2023. So he paid Joanne Yepsen's political consulting firm $6,600, which this kind of goes back to your earlier point, Adam. Joanne Yepsen also runs a PAC called Capital Women, and Capital Women endorsed Ron Kim. But of course, there was no disclosure that Capital Women is run by Joanne Yepsen, and Joanne Yepsen was also hired to be a consultant on Ron Kim's campaign. So there's a real kind of pay to play thing going on there that I find extremely distasteful. I don't know what you think about that, Adam.
Well, I'll say this: they've found a formula that's working for them, and they're not really being. Joanne Yepsen, former mayor, is behind a lot of campaigns and a lot of campaigns that are winning. So when people see
not a lot that are winning.
Well, when Saratoga Springs, when you see Capital Women, it's people. happened in our election. Commissioner Shangvi was endorsed by Capital Women and made a big deal about it. And it was a partisan PAC that sounds like a group of women who are working to further their interest in female interest in politics. Really, it's more about pushing their candidates. For instance, Gordon Boyd was endorsed, am I correct, over Michelle Madigan?
So actually, Adam, Capital Women endorsed more men than women. I went on their website. They, I believe, endorsed more men than women this election cycle. So it's not really about promoting women in politics. It's just about promoting the clients that they have and clients who they believe represent their progressive politics. But I think personally that if you're hired to be a consultant on someone's campaign and you also run a political action committee, and that political action committee endorses the client that you're being paid to consult with, that's a real conflict of interest. And that's something you should be disclosing when you make that endorsement. Of course, Joanne Yepsen chooses not to do that. Anyhow, Ron Kim paid Yepsen and Paluski $6,600. David Strange was a young man who was the campaign manager for Ron Kim. He was paid $6,800. This is, by the way, as of the last campaign filing that was, I think, due on June 23rd. Bergman Zwerdling Direct is Akeem Bergman. He handles all the mail pieces. He designs the mail pieces. He does a great job.
There were a lot of mailers that Ron Kim did, right?
Ron,
Five or six of them.
No, I think there were more. I swear to God, I think I got at least 7. And they were huge. Right. Some of them were like multi-page.
Robert, you mentioned me, one of your kids even noticed them, right?
Yeah. So actually, the last mailer that we got, my 11-year-old Charlie was like, "I know that guy," and I was like, "Jesus Christ, job well done, Akeem."
Yeah, right. That's at the end of the day. That's what you're trying to.
That's what you're trying to do. Job well done. It's
the point of mind marketing. You just these little hits.
Hammer it.
A quick aside or a quick interjection, Robin. As undisciplined as Ron Kim has been as mayor, he's been a pretty disciplined campaigner.
I don't think he's been a disciplined campaigner. I think he has a disciplined campaign team.
They've kept him within those reps. Then
great.
Let me ask you this. This was a big problem as running as an independent, is that for mailers, a major portion of that is postage. And when you run with when you run as an endorsed candidate by a party, you can get your mailings done at a not-for-profit rate as opposed to an independent who's got to pay full price. So Chris Matthiessen, I would imagine, would have to pay full price for his mailers. So it's really kind of how the major parties stack the decks to keep it's ours VDs.
That's a really, really good point, Adam. You have to pay regular stamp prices if you're an independent candidate. If you are the Democratic endorsed candidate or the Republican endorsed candidate, you get this dramatically lower mail rate, which is crazy. Then Ron Kim also has $14,500 in outstanding loans that his campaign owes him. He also made a $10,000 contribution to his campaign in June. So Ron Kim has spent a significant amount of his personal money on his campaign.
Well, let me ask you a question. As a finance guy, right? You have I would say balance sheet things and profit and loss things. So the Yepsen and Pakulski, my wife is Polish. I should be better at that. David Strange, the Berg. These are all expenses that he wrote checks for. Right. Correct. And got a product back. His loans, did he pay himself back that money?
No, those are still outstanding.
So he put that money in though, but that necessarily could have paid for the 3 line items above it.
That's the thing. That's actually an excellent point. It could have, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But he also did other fundraising. So I just wanted to go see what he spent on his campaign. I wasn't concerned about what he raised because I wanted to compare the spending of Chris's campaign to the spending of Ron's campaign. And so I didn't include in this, for example, the $10,000 contribution that Ron made to his own campaign that he's not listing as a loan that he can't be paid back for. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's so there's money coming in and then there's money going out.
Yes.
Right. So those loans is money that was coming in.
Yes. But will he pay himself back for the outstanding loans? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. So that was I just thought it was interesting, those numbers, because they were pretty significant. Now, I went through Chris's campaign filings, and his greatest expense was me at $4,000. So when you compare the spending in these primary campaigns, I mean, they were dramatically different. And the amount of money that Ron Kim spent to just turn out 850 people, as compared to the amount of money that Chris spent to turn out 566, tells me that if Chris had run a different campaign, Ron Kim was an easily beatable candidate, which is frustrating for me, Robin Dalton, to watch on the sidelines and think about, because I think Ron Kim is a shit mayor. So there you go. That's my take. That's my hot take, Adam Israel.
Yeah. Well, it is. It appears now. There's a lot of fundraising. Ron.
Oh wow, we've got 14 comments. Hold on. Oh Jesus Christ, my daughter is on comments. Hold on.
Hi, Alice.
Dalton children, get off of comments and clean the house. This is embarrassing. Clean the house, Dalton children. Goodbye. I'm sorry, guys. Please excuse
Hi, kids.
Children.
So going back to the I mean, I really think Mayor Kim saw this as this is the harder fight theoretically than he has coming up, which again, I think even though John Stafford has not produced in elections before, I think on a local level, it would be a fantastic candidate. I think he's going to be a tough candidate because he's just a likable guy. He's very philanthropic. He's a Vietnam vet. He's been around. He looks the part. He almost looked a little too polished, but I think he could be a hard candidate. But I really think Mayor Kim was treating this as the election to win.
Oh, 100%, because we know that in Saratoga Springs, if you have the Democratic line, you basically can hide in your basement for the whole election season, show up on election day and win. John Stafford, though, I would disagree with you on the strength of his candidacy. He's run for supervisor twice and he's run for mayor once, and he was unable to win, in any three of those races. And so perhaps he's learned lessons from those campaigns and he's going to kind of rejigger his approach this time. But I think we're looking at a really interesting dynamic for November, because Chris Matthiessen will still have the One Saratoga line. So the One Saratoga line is this hybrid line of 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. You've got Chris Matthiessen. You've got Tim Cole running for public safety on the Republican line, who's actually a registered Democrat, but whatever. And then you've got Michelle Madigan running for county supervisor. She's a Democrat. And then you've got Matthew Veach running for county supervisor. He's a Republican. So Chris Matthiessen will be on the ballot on the One Saratoga line. And my guess is these 566 people that voted for him in the primary, almost all of them are going to follow him to the One Saratoga line come the general election in November.
Yeah, he certainly he is not out of this.
Yeah,
he's going to be on the ballot. He is still in this race. Even we talked to him last night, and he is not. This is not conceding. This is not. I'm not going to be your next mayor. This is just we saw this with Michelle Madigan when she lost the primary to Patty Morrison by 30 votes, 33 to be exact.
Yeah.
But she went out and won the general election. So we've seen this happen before, and it was on the, there were other factors in that race. She was on more than just the One Saratoga line, but that was a big part of her getting across the finish line. There was that One Saratoga line.
So we didn't have a One Saratoga line in 2019, but we had a One Saratoga campaign where Meg Kelly, myself, and Michelle Madigan campaigned as One Saratoga as city over party. But
That's
what
right.
we did have is the Independence Party line. And so Michelle Madigan had the Independence Party line, the Working Families Party line, and the SAM line, which SAM doesn't exist anymore. I had 5 party lines back in 2019. It was
Independence doesn't exist anymore either.
So what happened was
again, the Democrats.
Well, basically what's the Democrats. So the Democrats in the state legislature raised the threshold for how many votes how many votes these third party lines had to get in a gubernatorial election to remain, to keep their status as a ballot line moving forward. And so basically almost all the third party lines didn't get enough votes in the last gubernatorial election to keep their status on the ballot. And so They all went goodbye, and the only ones that remain are the Conservative Party and the Working Families Party. So anyway, I don't want to get into the weeds on the technicalities, but do you think there is this weird kind of outside chance that Chris pulls, these 566 Democrats from the primary, plus a few more moderate Democrats on the one Saratoga line, and that pulls enough moderate Democrats away from Ron Kim such that if John Safford runs a strong campaign, he wiggles in and somehow we end up with a Republican mayor?
So this is what I've seen, right?
Yeah.
Is that it's that Mayor Kim made a lot of mistakes early on. Going back to the not having a city attorney, to the infighting, to the city council meetings being shut down by the BLM activists. He kind of in the last couple weeks pulled it together. He did a lot of things that again, some people might criticize him for, but they're effective, right? They hired a social media person for the city's Facebook page.
Yeah, although the social media person kind of blows. I'm sorry, but yes, they did.
But it does give, and that's just politics. It gave him a lot of ribbon cuttings, a lot of exposure.
Cranking out the ribbon cuttings.
There was essentially, the way is a kind of a slush fund for charities that there was a lot of money that the mayoral, slush fund, we'll call it, handed out money to a lot of deserving not-for-profits, but that's our money. That's not Ron's money. That's not the city's money. That's the taxpayers' money.
And that was actually a program that Commissioner Madigan set up, so that when there was, I won't get into the technicalities of it, but basically it was a program that Commissioner Madigan set up such that when there were monies available, the city could grant them to nonprofits. And so, so he took full advantage of that in primary season. It was,
the other thing, and we want to diverge this way a little bit, but the homeless shelter. I think at game time he got the parking garage cleared out. I drive by.
The parking garage being cleaned out. I want to talk about the parking garage being cleaned out.
Let's go there, because they're on Bonaccio Construction got a lot of compliments and a lot of praise, and rightfully so, for redoing a building, making it a 24/7 low barrier homeless shelter, which again, it was pushed through without a lot of public comment or a lot of listening to public comment, but at the end of the day, it cleaned out the and let me just give one example. I was at the Storts on Church Street there today, getting breakfast, and I was talking to the manager, and he said how much of a difference now as a manager, he can now be a manager to the customers and not, a security guard. So they were very happy about it. But what are your thoughts on that homelessness shelter?
So my thoughts are as follows. One, they did have the meeting to approve it on a Friday afternoon at like 4:30. So that was well played on their end because they managed to avoid a lot of public comment. Two, I have been advocating for a drop-in navigation center, meaning a homeless shelter that was open 365 days a year. That could be a drop-in homeless shelter for anyone who needed shelter at any time. But part of that I thought was really, really an important part of the equation was that it be a navigation center and that we work with the county to have social services set up in that shelter such that when homeless people were there, we had an opportunity potentially to connect them with services they needed and hopefully transition them into some longer term housing solutions. To me, that was a really, really vitally important part of the equation. So when I see pictures of the Woodlawn Garage and I see it looking good, I think to myself, was the point of this shelter just to get rid of the visual of people who are homeless in downtown Saratoga Springs? Was it just to take them from one place that we didn't like seeing them in and plunk them down over here? Because I believe because a low barrier, no barrier shelter allows them to be drunk, to drink, whatever. So we're just going to give them a more comfortable place to drink and be vagrants. I mean, we've succeeded in doing that. That's great. But how does this help them with their needs of being unhoused?
Yeah.
That is what my question is.
Well, I'll give a compliment and then a criticism here. I will say this is that for right now, it seems like we don't really have any long-term plan of how this is going to be funded. Right now, Saratoga's on the hook. At one of the city council meetings, they were saying go to the county, and the county should be paying for this.
This pisses me off what you're about to say, but
Yeah,
not at you. But yes, go ahead.
Piss on me too. I don't mind, but anyway, but the county should be really footing a lot of this bill, because this is something this is not. There's a big debate about this, but at the end of the day, I grew up in the city. There were homeless people here, 4 or 5 of them, 3 or 4 of them. You knew who they were. You recognize them. The people here now are not originating from Saratoga, and the majority of them. You're not going to be able to look that fact up, because the people providing services won't give you those numbers, because it doesn't help their narrative. But the fact of the matter is, we're housing a lot of the capital districts and a lot of Saratoga counties homeless that's on the taxpayers' dime of the citizens of the Saratoga.
But if they were or weren't, it doesn't matter. We don't have social services. That is not part of what we provide as a city. We don't have a social services agency. That's what the county has. And that's what we pay taxes for to the county. So I don't care if they're Saratoga Springs residents or not. That is what the county's responsibility is with their social services department. Mm-hmm. And so for the Saratoga Springs City Council and our supervisors to rush this through and to not try to work with the county in terms of funding, because I want to get it through before the summer season, before the primary election, whatever, and foot the bill, I thought was bullshit. And then I also thought it was bullshit that, at a city council meeting, Ron Kim saying, hey, if anybody's listening out there, you should all go down to one of this county board of supervisors meetings and tell them you want them to start paying for our shelter. Like, are you fucking kidding me? That is not the job of residents. That is your job to go and actually try to have a relationship with the county and talk to them, and you figure that out. You don't tell residents to go down and just comment at a county board of supervisors meetings and be like, you guys should pay for this. Like, that's going to be that's going to be effective. Give me a break, Ron Kim. Give me a break. Plus, we have 2 county supervisors sitting in that meeting. Talk to them, to have them work it out. That's not on the job of us. And then I also got a little irritated because, as you said, we are paying for this as taxpayers. And the very first thing I saw on Facebook when it opened was a list of needs that the shelter had that they're soliciting the public for. And I just thought, we're already being asked for, towels, deodorant, toiletries, whatever. And I thought, didn't we all just agree to pay for this as taxpayers? But now we're all being asked to reach into our pocket and personally make contributions as well. And it's been open for 24 hours. And I know I'm probably coming off right now as like very anti, like a horrible humanitarian, like not humanitarian at all and not empathetic at all. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Adam knows, and a lot of people who know me know, that the homeless population, I believe, is our most vulnerable population. They are so near and dear to my heart. I've worked with shelters of Saratoga for years to help this population. I was just at their luncheon yesterday. I volunteered at Code Blue. It was on my block for years. Like, I feel very close to this population and have supported them with my, blood, sweat, and tears and money for years. So I don't want to get it twisted that I'm like anti-homeless somehow. I just think the way that this was done leaves something to be, I don't know. So again, going back to my this is a kind of a mid-session cheer and jeer. I will say this: I've driven by it a number of times. There's a chain fence that they've kind of put a barrier through. You can see through. You see people out there playing basketball, having lunch. Right now, I'm going to give credit until proven otherwise, and it seems like it's done the city a lot of good. Now, I know what you mean. It also seems like it could be set up for failure, but right now I think they're doing a great job. But going back to kind of my issue with this core committee Democratic group we have, part of my problem is, and Robin, you mentioned this, there was some bad blood between Shelters of Saratoga, which is a not-for-profit, does great work, and this, particularly Mayor Kim and the city council. And you went to a Shelters of Saratoga event, and there wasn't a single representative. There wasn't a single person from the city council or city government at the Shelters of Saratoga main fundraiser yesterday. which is called One Fine Day. And I was shocked. And I also think it's disgusting that our city council, in many ways, shapes, and forms, kind of pitted Rise against Shelters of Saratoga, two incredible organizations. I mean, that's gross. Why would you? That's just gross. They both do incredible work, and yeah, their causes overlap, but there should be synergy there. There shouldn't be some weird,
Yeah, it comes back to collaboration.
Yes.
Right. This city council, if it's not, sometimes it seems more about ego than collaborating for the best result. Real quick, I want to say Dan commented that he is on for comments now. He's having technical issues, but we'll keep an eye out for any Dans. We're wishing you're with us, but we'll keep an eye out for your comments, buddy.
One other thing that I really wanted to uplift that Commissioner Golub said at the last city council meeting, he said that a lot of people at the shelter that's open right now on Adelphi Street are looking for jobs. They're really, really looking for work. And so he kind of was putting out an appeal for anyone who is looking for part-time workers or just workers in general to please try to connect with the folks at Adelphi Street, because they're really seriously looking for jobs. And so that was just something I wanted to uplift on this podcast and kind of put out there for people who might be looking for anyone to employ.
Yeah, real quick, Robin, and because this kind of falls into my wheelhouse. I remember there was a gentleman who actually had worked himself out of homelessness, who had starting a landscaping company and was employing members of our homeless population. And that's all I recall. Do you have any more information on that?
That does not ring a bell to me, but it sounds incredible. It doesn't ring a bell to me off the top of my head.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know I've heard of stories like that in general in life, not Saratoga Springs specific ones. But I mean, just yesterday we heard from a resident of Shelters of Saratoga, a woman named Nancy who had been formerly homeless and an alcoholic. And she talked through the ways in which Shelters of Saratoga helped her get back on her feet, get an apartment, make a living, and find value and worth in herself, and be proud of the person that she was, and feel like she was part of a community again, and how much she loves giving back to that community. And it was like one of the most incredible and inspiring things you could possibly hear. And so, and Rise is obviously engaged in the same kind of work. And so if the folks at this shelter, because they have a bed now and because they have food now, if that enables them to be in a position where they can then get a job, and you're able to offer these folks a job, I mean, that could really make the difference between them then being able to get out of the shelter into some kind of permanent housing. So that could make a really incredible difference in the lives of the folks that are there right now, who are looking for work. So, yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something there. Stay tuned for next show. Maybe
Yeah.
And if anybody knows the gentleman or the scenario or the company or the organization I'm talking about, please chime in, message us, comment us, call me, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter sphere, whatever.
Don't Twitter. Adam's not on Twitter.
I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Twitter a little bit, but
Adam's on Facebook. Tweet me and I'll get it to Adam.
Yeah.
What else do we want to talk about here? Oh, the one thing that they spoke about in the last city council meeting that was like a little bit, I kind of wanted to get your take on, was this kind of gun legislation that that Commissioner Montanino has been proposing. I don't know if you watched the kind of debate over it. It's a little bit, I can't decide if it's effective and if it's worthwhile for them to continue to pursue or not. But it's essentially this reworking chapter of the city code such that if you had a firearm while intoxicated, that would be like a misdemeanor charge or something. But essentially what the commissioner was saying in the last council meeting was that it is kind of duplicative of state and federal law in some respects. And so really at the crux of it, it's basically just a way to let people know that we don't want them to come and party and get drunk with a gun. And that's about it.
Yeah. So, what's interesting is that I think that, the first person who brought this up was Gordon Boyd, who's running for supervisor, who I'm not necessarily a fan of. We have some mutual connections that we're working out with our family, which is great. But my first reaction is this has got to be a law already. Federally, I don't actually know that it is. State-wise, it might be, but I'm kind of tilting on this, where this I think would be a good thing. And the really interesting thing I thought about this was, Gordon Boyd, who's kind of part of that progressive left, Democratic committee that I'm not really a fan of, was proposing this and speaking this in public comment, and he was getting a lot of pushback from BLM. Because BLM was hearkening it back to stop and frisk, which
right.
Again, it's boy, you look at New York City and what Giuliani did there before Giuliani was Giuliani, right? And I just heard stories how Times Square got turned around with these broken window laws and policing,
right?
But now, with how we look at policing now. And the inherent, I don't know if that's the right word, but how does this affect the minority community?
Well, I actually kind of think there's a real point there, and I'm gonna put Dan has a comment that I'm gonna put up in 1 second, but basically, Commissioner Golub articulated this I think really well. He was like, what I'm concerned about is how procedurally this will work for a police officer, because essentially what it would allow, if a police officer sees someone who's intoxicated walking down the street, it then allows for them to stop that person and stop and frisk them for a gun.
I don't think so. I think they would. And Dan, it's too bad.
They're rewriting it now, but
you would have to have. They would have to be some kind of suspicion that person did have a gun, right?
There wouldn't. They would just be able to be drunk, based on the initial way this was written.
Well, okay. So again, boy, Dan, we'll have this when you're on. But my understanding is that police need reasonable cause. Let's see what he said here.
Dan said the gun legislation is not bad, I guess, but it's along the line of feel-good legislation. Yeah, exactly. Not necessarily effective. I'm at a loss as to why Jim Montenegro didn't get the city council to make a motion requesting the state legislature before they left at the end of the session and get a statewide law with some teeth. Yeah, so honestly, Jim Montenegro did basically fully admit in this conversation that the whole point of this was for people to hear that we were passing something like this, so that they would get the message that they really shouldn't bring a gun out while they were drinking. And we could put up some signs around town. And between that and the press that covers the city council meetings, we would get the message out that we really wouldn't tolerate people drinking and carrying firearms. And that was literally it.
So let's go back to what you were talking before. Let's say it's illegal to be drunk and carry drugs on you, right? But just being drunk, police can't, just because you're drunk, stop and search you for drugs. But with that being said, public intoxication is a crime. So would that give a police officer the right to then go stop I don't think it's legal just to go up and search somebody because you want to go search them, right? But if they're drunk, does that cross or they're now committing a crime that gives a police officer the ability? For me, this is more. We see this with policing, where if somebody stopped, let's say for a DWI, or somebody's in a fight, they attack somebody, they assault somebody, and they're drunk, then the police are going to stop, take them into custody. At that point, if they find a gun on them, now they have additional charges on them, right? So police's job is to throw as many charges and as much, pardon my language, he said, shit against the wall, and then let the DA figure out what will stick. And this is just one other thing where somebody commits another crime, does something else, then this is just another charge that they can have on there.
So that's exactly where they kind of ended up, which was Commissioner Gold was saying, I would support this as a piggyback onto something else.
Yeah.
So
that's what Dan said. Dan chimed in and said that this would be, as noted in the meeting, would be likely to be a secondary charge. So yeah, I have no problem with that. Stop and frisk laws don't. Well, again, there's a whole racial component there, and that's we've talked about this. Is a very complicated subject, but at the end of the day, these broken law policing really cut down on crime.
Well, broken windows policing is different than stop and frisk, but yes,
they're different. Yeah. Come on, Dan, this is all over your wheelhouse.
God damn it, Dan, you're IT. Yeah. But I will say there's one of the points that I think Commissioner Moran was making is that there's no way to test for someone being intoxicated by just like looking at them. Like you have to give someone a breathalyzer.
I don't think that's true. That's not true. So police can make DWI arrests based.
DWI, yes. They were talking aside from seeing someone you swerve over the yellow, aside from someone being in a vehicle, they're just talking about people walking around.
Yeah, but I think a police officer doesn't need to give a breathalyzer to legally determine if somebody's drunk or not. It certainly helps the case, but I don't think it's required.
Just that, I don't know.
Yeah, we have the state police.
Weigh in, Dan. Weigh in.
Yeah, that's.
Let's see. He hasn't written anything yet. All right. Well, all I know is that I can't drink. I get breakout in hives. I'm allergic to alcohol, so I guess I don't have to worry about being stopped and frisked for a gun. I guess also I don't have a gun. So anyway, I don't know.
So you're safe.
Now I'm babbling.
You're a sober, non-drunk. You're a sober, non-gun holder.
You can always count on
Dan and I this might affect Dan and I a little more than you.
Yeah, totally. Anyway, at the end of the conversation, Jim, it was actually the most kind of cordial exchange I've heard between the council and Jim, where he was like, I agree. Everyone expressed their concerns. And he was like, I agree to work with you. I will withdraw this motion and I will work with you guys to come up with a new draft of this. We'll have a public hearing at the July 6th meeting, because the next meeting would fall on the 4th of July. So we're going to move it to Thursday. We'll have a public hearing, the July 6th meeting, and then they'll have a discussion and vote at the following meeting in July. So
that goes back to what we were talking about with this Matthiesen primary. If nothing else, it cut out this crazy kind of school children acts that our city council is going through. It kind of forced them to be adults at that city council table.
Yeah, you got to give. I have to say, you have to give Chris Matthiesen major props for stepping up to primary him, because just that alone, I think, has made Ron Kim hold himself more accountable for his actions, because he knows there's a threat, and that is thanks to Chris Matthiesen. So
I'm a little afraid now that as this kind of Democratic committee keeps winning pretty convincingly, are they just going to keep doubling down on the crazy? And at what point do they not double down on the crazy, or at what point does the city say enough already? I guess TBD.
I know. To bring up one last thing that you kind of touched on very, very early on. Oh, also, I should mention that Shelters of Saratoga announced yesterday that the former Grand Union Motel on South Broadway in Saratoga Springs will house the 2023-2024 Code Blue Winter Shelter beginning in the fall of 2023. Shelters of Saratoga will operate it in partnership with Saratoga County. It will open when temperatures drop below 32 degrees. The new location will shelter up to 80 adults, in addition to the recently opened shelter on Adelphi, which is a short walk away. So there's that.
So a question I have about that. I know a big problem. So Code Blue was where this now homeless shelter is. So that's why they need to find a new place for Code Blue. Correct. They have identified and found a new place. The first question is that it was a big deal of operating Code Blue just when it falls below 32 degrees is very difficult for staffing, which I can, as a business guy, I can understand. It's like, hey guys, you don't have a job unless it gets below freezing. It's hard to get people to make a living doing that. But will this be run just when it's below 32? And here's something kind of anecdotally about the homelessness population we have and everything that's been going on. It's now kind of here to stay. Saratoga City, the city of Saratoga Springs has a large homeless population. It was, and this is just a story. It's just nothing really behind it. But I had a trailer over on the west side for a couple of weeks, and I was doing some work, and I went to get that trailer, and there was a cigarette packet in it, and I grabbed it, and 3 syringes fell out. Now, Now these syringes they look brand new. They had caps on them. Thank God, right? So somewhere syringes must be. I would imagine, I'm making a leap here, but are being distributed to people who need them. And I'm thinking, on one hand, is this a great idea? On the other hand, thank goodness those syringes had caps on them, because there was just wet cardboard between those syringes and my fingers. But it's a problem Saratoga has to address. And again, it comes down to collaboration. And I hope our city council and our city government can find ways to collaborate instead of keep on taking this on the taxpayer, the local taxpayer.
Adam, one time when I was volunteering at Code Blue, when it was on Caroline Street, 4 houses below me, this was back when Shelters of Saratoga was being run by somebody else. I was volunteering. There were 2 people who were quote unquote working there. They had all gone out on cigarette breaks. I was the only person in Code Blue with probably 40 men. And there were so many people shooting up in the bathroom that I I had no idea what I was doing, but I decided on my own. I instituted like an open door policy in the bathroom because there were so many people shooting up in the bathroom. I was like afraid we were going to have an overdose. And I don't know what to freak to do in an overdose situation. But so the needle drug situation has been going on for a while. And I think it's getting really,
what's funny?
Yeah.
Again, this is like the Democrat in me, is that they have those in clubs too for people for cocaine.
Oh,
so the stalls will be open because the rampant cocaine use in some clubs. So
oh my God.
I guess the rich and the poor, will find a way to use. But
yeah, and I was like, it was not a great situation for me because I was certainly not trained in handling any of that situation by myself. But I was happy. That's why I've been thrilled with Dwayne Vaughn and how he's run shelters in Saratoga, because certainly no volunteer would ever be in that position now. And to your point about how they staff Code Blue, Shelters has been running Code Blue now for so many years, and they have the staffing down pat, and they don't always stick to the 32-degree thing because it's just, there's so many situations where it's 35, 37, 39, it's sleeting, it's hailing.
Right. But how does the funding, how the county will fund this?
It's funded through, a lot of the funding comes through the county.
Yeah, but will the county fund it if it's above 32, right? I don't know the answer to this. I will say this, though. You're right. I've met Dwayne Vaughn. I think he's an incredible guy. I think he's an incredible asset to the city and to addressing our homeless population. I wish more people would listen to him sometimes, but he's a great guy.
Well, we should invite him on the show. And one of the things, he said yesterday at the luncheon, which I just thought was so kind of poignant, was he was talking about, he made this announcement about this new Code Blue being open, but he said that it didn't bring him any joy to make the announcement because in his perfect world, what he would be celebrating was closing the doors of a shelter and not opening a new shelter.
Yeah.
And that's what he hopes to be celebrating someday. And I just thought that was very poignant. Yeah. Anyhow, should we go on to cheers and jeers? Dan, I hope you're there, and I hope you comment with your cheer and jeer. Should we move on to our cheers and jeers, Adam? Do you have anything else to go over?
Sure.
All right. What do you have, my friend?
All right. I have 2 cheers. No jeers today. First, I would just a cheer to Chris Mathieson for running the campaign. We've been candidates before. It sucks. You open yourself up. Once you decide to run for political office, we've talked about this before. There's a large segment of people who think they can come out and just abuse you, and you're subhuman now, and they can twist stories about you. They can dive deep into your life. They can they jump into your family's life. It's sick, and it drives me nuts when people do that. But it is politics. It does happen. So cheers to Chris Mathieson, but cheers to Ron Kim for running a campaign, winning the Democratic primary, and going to be facing off against Chris Mathieson on a different line and John Safford. But at the end of the day, the democracy speaks, and he got the most votes. So congratulations and cheers to Mayor Kim.
Yes, absolutely. I will be classy for one moment too and say congratulations, Mayor Kim, on your well-earned victory. My other cheer is that I wanted to cheer Mary Beth Delarme. She spoke out in public comment at the last city council meeting and made a really powerful and well-received statement about the lack of control and the how public comment has just devolved at city council meetings. And so I just wanted to cheer her because and maybe I'll play it on the next podcast, but her public comment was really powerful and really just like on the money. And so I just wanted to cheer her for making that public comment because it takes a lot of courage to get up and say what she said. And I thought she did an excellent job. My jeer, Dan DeFederici, it's coming right at you, buddy. I'm coming over to your house and I'm fixing your IT, my friend, because we need you back on this podcast with no IT issues. I miss your beautiful face, sir. I'm coming over to your house. We're fixing your Wi-Fi. You are my jeer this week, my friend. I love you, but you're my jeer. Let's see if I think I see comments. Okay, wait, here he is. Dan, cheers, Saratoga Rec, they rock, with a special shout out to Lisa Morahan, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, who is so good running the beginner softball program. Yes, cheer to Lisa and Saratoga Rec Department. They do freaking rock. Okay, let's see. One more. Not a jeer, but a lament. It was touched on earlier. The November elections will only have 2 competitive seats on the council, and no matter how much we like certain office holders, the lack of choice is bad for democracy. I couldn't agree more. And I actually think that counts as a jeer and a lament. I think it stinks, guys. I think it stinks. We went from the last election cycle to having the most candidates we've ever had running to this election cycle having probably like, I can't say it's the least ever, but a lot. Dan also said, yay, Dan got cheered. And then Dan also said, I'll hang with Robin's kids. They apparently have good Wi-Fi. Yes, apparently they do. I quite agree. Well, it was great to be back with you guys. Listen, next week is 4th of July week, and the city council meeting is going to be on a Thursday. So I've got to talk to you guys, but I think we will probably podcast on Friday so we could recap the city council meeting. So we'll let people know. Doesn't that make sense? Don't you think?
I think so.
Yeah. But we'll try to get back on a more regular schedule. We miss all of you guys. And I want to cheer to the almost 10,000 people we had watched the Saratoga podcast in the month of May. We are so thankful for all of our viewers. So share the Saratoga podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple. It's freaking everywhere, guys. Find us, share, and thank you for watching. Adam, great to see you.
Stay charming, Saratoga.
Bye.